Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're here today to discover your future in New Zealand, and we are here with University of Waikato Law Program, and we will be talking about the law programs that will lead you to pathways to residency programs. So, to talk about today's program, I will be the host of today's webinar. My name is Priyanka Amin. I am the Manager Client Relation with Immigration Advisors New Zealand Limited. And who are we? We are Immigration Advisors New Zealand Limited. We are based out of Auckland in New Zealand. The photo that you see over there is where our office is located in Auckland. We are a group of 4 licensed immigration advisors, and we have handled clients for over 30 countries. We have a support staff of over 6 different nationalities, so that helps us to actually speak your language. So you might be surprised if you give us a call and we would be able to actually speak your language. So we have been in this immigration industry for over 20 years, and we are the most reviewed licensed immigration advisors in New Zealand. Locally, we are present in India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Philippines, and Middle East. All right. So moving ahead, we will now talk about and introduce our today's speakers. So we have 3 panelists. So the first one that I would be introducing would be Mrs. Vandana Rai, a senior licensed immigration advisor. And Mrs. Vandana Rai, she is a migrant as well, and she will be talking about or giving you immigration advice, and along with it, she would also be answering the Q&A, which will be towards the end of this webinar or towards the end of this presentation. So with this, Mrs. Rai, would you like to say hello to our participants?
Yeah, thank you so much, Priyanka. A big
Welcome.
thanks to Professor Nathan and Mr. Ashish for taking out time to give awareness of their programs that the University of Waikato has to offer. We're really thankful to all the attendees for taking out time, and we look forward to giving you information not only about the law programs, but also how these programs lead you to your pathway to residence here in New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next speaker whom we have is an associate professor at Tiparenga Faculty of Law with University of Waikato, Mr. Professor Nathan Cooper. He works as the interface of environmental law and human rights law, and in particular on questions around the compatibility of right claims with ecologically sustainable governance. He believes in the importance of international connections and the enriching potential of international research and study. He always keeps looking to develop Tiparenga Faculty of Law strategic partnerships and to grow opportunities for international research collaboration, student exchange, study abroad, and recruitment. So, with this, he should be able to guide you with today's programs that we will be talking about. And so, Professor Nathan, welcome to our today's webinar. Would you like to say hello to our participants?
Thank you, Priyanka. Hello, kia ora. Good evening to you all. It's an absolute pleasure to have an hour with you and to be able to talk to you about some of the opportunities that we have waiting for you at the University of Waikato and particularly at our Faculty of Law. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Professor. And next we have Mr. Ashish Suri, who is the Regional Manager South Asia of University of Waikato. Ashish Suri doesn't just like being the regional manager, he's also a go-to person for any kind of, product knowledge or things like that. So Ashish, welcome to our today's webinar. Would you like to say hello?
Kia ora everyone, and thank you to the Immigration Advisors team to set up this faculty webinar sessions for students. And we really look forward to interacting with students and giving them not only about law, but if you really want to know a bit more about Waikato, feel free to ask us. We'll be very happy to answer them a bit more about other, I would say, most popular qualifications with students at this moment. Look forward to this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. So moving forward, I am just going to talk about scope of today's webinar. We would be mostly talking around the 4 programs that are being offered at University of Waikato. It would be Master of Laws, Graduate Diploma in Law, Master of Legal Studies, Graduate Diploma in Dispute Resolution. All right. And with this, I would now like to pass it over to Professor Nathan Cooper, and I would stop my presentation slide here. So, Professor, over to you.
Thank you, Priyanka. I hope that everybody can hear me okay and can see the slide that's now showing and being shared on my screen. So hopefully thumbs up. Is that okay?
All good. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. We'll proceed then. So as Priyanka said, we're going to talk in the main about the postgraduate opportunities that are available in law and law-related study at the University of Waikato. But I thought I'd sort of start with a few sort of introductory questions, because if you're here and you're listening to this webinar, you obviously have some interest in the study of law. That might mean that you have a background in having studied law at undergraduate level. It might mean that you have a law degree, or that you're in the middle of that law degree or beginning that law degree. It might mean that you've actually had a very unrelated background, but you've still got some interest in the study of law going forward. So I'm going to start by a few comments around why it's important to study law, why studying law is a really worthwhile thing to consider at whatever level that is. And then I'll spend a bit of time thinking about why you would study law in New Zealand. And thirdly, bringing that down to a slightly more narrow focus of why you might want to study law at the University of Waikato. So why study law then? There are so many subjects out there. There are so many disciplines out there that you could study. Why law? Well, in the midst of a very, very changing career landscape, in the midst of new jobs emerging, new career types, new employment profiles and models emerging, law remains an absolutely steady employment space and a set of skills for students to take on and become extremely employable in a whole range of different areas. So the first reason why I would encourage people to think further about studying law is because essentially what you're doing when you're studying law is that you're learning to think in a particular way. That might mean for some people that they go on to become practicing lawyers. That might mean that they become solicitors, barristers, attorneys, the sorts of things that you might see on TV. But for many, many other people, the study of law is really about learning to think in a particular way. And that particular way is the way of thinking like a lawyer. And if you can take that on board in your studies, if you can become equipped and skilled to think like a lawyer, you will be useful in a whole array of different job contexts, a whole array of different employment contexts, a whole array of different entrepreneurial contexts as well. So really it's about thinking analytically. It's about deep thinking. It's about developing your argumentative skills, okay? Your ability to put together argument. It's about an extremely high level of both verbal and written communication. And if you can do that in any of the law qualifications and programs that we'll talk about together today, then you really do set yourself up for a whole host of different career-related opportunities. And obviously career and career-related opportunities is so important to that ambition around residence, that ambition around relocation and migration that is important for many students and prospective students. So just thinking then, one step beyond your legal studies, your study of law in whatever shape that might take, here are some, and just some, of the areas that open up for students who have a law background, a legal education background at different levels. Of course, there's legal practice, and we'll talk a bit more about that in due course. That's your sort of bread and butter on the TV. What does it look like in a court? What does it look like working for a client as a solicitor? But beyond that, so many other opportunities as well. And a lot of these opportunities are ones that I'm excited about, particularly because I see our students go into these areas in ever increasing numbers. So the first one then, that second bullet point on the screen, is the opportunity to work in government ministries. The sorts of ministries I'm talking about include, for instance, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Trade. That's a big government ministry down in Wellington with a huge legal department, a whole bank of legal advisors. And if you look at their background, they're all Master of Law graduates, okay? They all come from the LLM in different places. So Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Corrections, for instance. One of our recent graduates a couple of years ago, about 12 months ago, got herself a really interesting job with the Department of Corrections in the probation service as a senior manager within the probation service, using her legal background, her Master of Laws background, to do something really related, and as a result has moved into a residence track. Also, lots of opportunities around policy. And we talk about policy quite loosely, but essentially we mean public plans. What is it that organizations, whether that's ministries, local government, central government, regional government, what are they doing to pursue agendas, but to pursue action points, to pursue policy in different spheres? So if you have a legal background, an ability to be able to think in a particular way, to develop argumentation, to develop your written and oral skills to a high level, you're going to be useful in that policy space. And again, we have recent graduates who are working in the policy space, for instance, in environmental policy with local and regional government, in corrections, Ministry of Justice, and elsewhere. Another opportunity, and this is again on the increase, is for people with a legal background to become in-house legal advisors. Increasingly, small and medium companies are finding it too expensive to keep pushing their legal questions out to private solicitors. It's much more cost effective to have somebody with a law background sitting in-house, sitting within the company, who's able to field those legal questions and offer that legal advice. So lots of in-house legal opportunities as well. And then there's a whole range of things that are kind of allied to law. If we think about it, for instance, human resources in a corporate setting, or in a third sector setting, a charity setting, or even a university setting, human resources in the main is about an understanding of employment law. It's about an understanding of health and safety law and all sorts of other related areas of law. So opportunities in human resources, in mediation, in accountancy firms as well. Accountancy, of course, is about accounts, but more than that, it's about understanding tax law and revenue law and all sorts of other things that are related. So your legal studies at whatever level can open up a whole variety of doors like the ones on screen. Then moving to that question of, well, why study law in New Zealand? The world's a big place. It may be that you have an opportunity to study law in a whole array of different countries. As a starting point, I just thought I'd share the map, because sometimes people aren't entirely sure where New Zealand is. And at this point, I have to confess, I wasn't entirely sure where New Zealand was before I came to live in New Zealand 6 years ago. So I am an immigrant to New Zealand. I'm from the UK originally, and I made that move to New Zealand 6 years ago, and I haven't looked back. It's been an absolutely fantastic move for me. So that's where New Zealand is in relation there to Southeast Asia and Australia and the United States. So a few little pointers in terms of why New Zealand itself. In terms of our university sector, we're a small country, we have a small number of universities, but the great thing about that is that all of those universities are really good. And secondly, because there's only a small number of them, students and prospective students can quite quickly get a feel for what the opportunities are across those universities, what some of the meaningful differences are between those universities, and so can quite quickly get to a point where you can make really informed, really meaningful judgments. As a country itself, it's very beautiful, it's very safe, it's a great work-life balance, it's a great sort of lifestyle and standard of living that most people enjoy. And all of that really does round out that sense of where it is that you're choosing to study, because part of that question of where you're choosing to study will often also be, where are you choosing to live? Where are you choosing to make a future? Even where are you choosing to have key friendships and family in due course? So for all of those reasons, New Zealand really is a great opportunity and a great destination. Zoning in a little bit then on the University of Waikato and where we are in New Zealand. University of Waikato's main campus, an older campus, is in the city of Hamilton on the North Island. We're about an hour and a half south of Auckland. Really easy to get to, really lovely place to be. And as you can see on the screen, the campus itself is set in several acres of parkland. All of that area, all of that land is available for students to walk through and to navigate the campus as they wish. It's a safe campus. It's an easy campus to get around. You don't need a car, or you don't need to take a taxi within the campus or anything. Everything is walkable and very accessible. It's where I spend the majority of my time at Hamilton, but also we have another smaller campus in the city of Tauranga. Tauranga is in the Bay of Plenty on the northeast coast of the country. And that campus has actually recently moved into a very, very new and very beautiful set of buildings. For those of you who like being near the coast, particularly any of you who are aspiring surfers or sea swimmers, then Tauranga is also a coastal city. Unlike Hamilton, Hamilton's about 45-50 minutes from the coast. So two locations that the university is based over. And then that third question then, well, why study law? Why study law in New Zealand, but why study law at Waikato? Why study law at the University of Waikato? Well, we're very proud that the University of Waikato is not just a good university, it's in the top 250 universities in the world in the QS ranking. That means that coming to the University of Waikato is coming to a place where you get first-rate education, a really, really good standard of education that will stand out from the crowd. And law at Waikato is long established. There's been a law faculty at Waikato for 30 years. And we have a purpose-built building to house the law faculty. Now, this building divides opinion. Some people think it looks like a spaceship. Some people think it looks like a prison. Either way, it's nice and new, and it's a great place to be based as a student or as a member of staff. This is where I spend my time up there. And when the university decided back in the early 1990s to launch a faculty of law, it was decided that that faculty would be based on 3 founding values. Those values are still important to us, and I want to share them very briefly because they help to distinguish University of Waikato from some of the other opportunities and some of the other institutions that are around in New Zealand as options for you. So the first thing is that right from the get-go, the law faculty at Waikato was focused and committed to biculturalism. If you know some of the history of New Zealand, New Zealand has a rich history, but it's a history that's based on both in its indigenous culture, the Maori people who've been here for many hundreds of years, but also from European culture as well. And New Zealand, like many places, has gone through a period of colonization and is now in many respects in a kind of a post-colonial period. So fusing those two together and thinking about how those two sit well alongside is really an important question, an important challenge for us at the law school. So biculturalism. Professionalism. Again, professionalism is really, really important when we're thinking about the sort of position that you might find yourself in now. What does professionalism mean for us? It means that our students get the skills, get the exposure, get the experience that they need so that they can immediately be useful employees, useful people in practice, useful people out in the world of work. So we really do focus not just on the kind of academic side of things, but also on those practical or professional skills so that students become skilled professionals really as early in their career as possible. And then thirdly, we were always committed and remain committed to teaching and learning about the law in its context. Law is never, ever removed from the wider world. We can't talk about law or understand law unless we're also aware of the economic contexts that surround us, the social, the political, the environmental increasingly as well. So we are committed to teaching and learning about law in context. And because those three values really underpin the law school at Waikato, and because they regularly are used as a sounding board to test what it is that we teach and how it is that we teach, students really get a great opportunity to understand the bicultural nature of New Zealand, to get professional skills that will see them well served in jobs, and also to really have the best, most applicable understanding of law because they understand the context in which law exists. A few little pointers in terms of kind of how we go about our teaching, our commitment to teaching and learning at Waikato, which is often quite different for some students who come from other locations. So the first point of difference then is that we really put an emphasis on interactive learning. You may or may not, depending on your background, you may be used to higher education being quite a one-way communication, a one-way street. The lecturer, the professor, whoever they are, they stand or they sit at the front and you listen. Your job is simply to listen, to take notes. At Waikato, we believe that there's a better set of ways to educate and a better set of ways to teach and learn. And so right from day one, we encourage our students, whether that's postgraduate students, undergraduate students, everybody, to be involved in a two-way conversation. And so we really do focus on what we're describing as interactive learning. Second, and this is again really important, particularly for welcoming international students to us, every student on every program has an opportunity to be taught in smaller groups as well as the larger groups. And it's really in those smaller groups, the small group tutorials, seminars, workshops, people call them different things. In those smaller groups, that is when students get to know each other. They get to build confidence in their interactions with each other and their interactions with their tutors and their professors. And then thirdly, this is really important and a real point of difference compared to many institutions. At Waikato and at the law faculty included, students find it easy to connect with their educators, with their professors, with their tutors. It's easy to find time to sit down with your professor and talk to them about the questions that you've got. To say you don't understand something, to get some input, to get some FaceTime and one-on-one opportunity to ask those questions. It's easy because we are around a lot, because our policy is that our door is open and students are able to get that quick and simple point of contact. Having worked previously in other bigger institutions in the UK, I can tell you now that that is often not the case, that it's difficult to find time to chat with professors, difficult to find time to be able to have your questions answered face-to-face and one-to-one. So that's a really important point of difference that I think is of huge importance to particularly international students. And then fourthly, as I mentioned, in terms of those founding values, our focus on professionalism really means that the activities that we encourage our students into are work related. And so there's a lot of impetus and a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on practical skills as well as the more traditionally academic skills as well. That's just a shot there of some of my students in our moot court, in our mock courtroom, in the basement of the building, where we make all of our undergraduate students take part in mock trials. And that's a great experience for them, but lots of other practically related opportunities as well. And last then, in terms of our point of difference, law school can be quite a competitive environment. It can be quite a sort of a cutthroat environment, if you like. You've got a whole bunch of students who are bright and who are motivated and who are ambitious. And unless we get that environment right, it can be quite a difficult environment to navigate, both as students and as staff. So we do real hard work on emphasizing students' relationship with each other and with us as colleagues, not as competitors. Of course, there will come a point where in the world of work, you have to go out and compete with others to get that job or to get that promotion. But while you're with us at Waikato, you can concentrate on honing those skills for the future, but your peers, the people you spend your time with and rub shoulders with, are really those that you can relate to as colleagues. And you can kind of breathe deeply and sort of have a bit of a safe space while you're with us on campus. And we really do interact with each other, both as staff and as students, along the lines of being colleagues, not competitors. So moving from those more general points, why study law, why study in New Zealand, and why study law at Waikato, I want to spend just a few minutes talking about some specific programs and some specific program opportunities. And the first one I want to talk about is what we find is the most popular opportunity for international students. That is our program, our Master of Laws program, okay? So postgraduate qualification, master's degree, a 1-year LLM, Master of Laws. Now, the first thing to make absolutely clear about this program, this qualification, is that it is only open to students who have an LLB degree already. That LLB can come from anywhere. You can be from any jurisdiction. That's fine, but you do need to have an LLB as your background. In a minute, I will talk about opportunities for students who don't have an LLB. So please don't turn off. Please don't go away. Watch this space. That's coming for you if you don't have an LLB. But this LLM is available only for students with an LLB degree already. Okay, so it's a 1-year program. It's a master's program. There are 2 points where you can join us in any given year. That's around the February-March time and also in the July time. It doesn't matter which one of those that you choose, your experience of the LLM will be the same. Our LLM can be studied as a general master's degree of law, or students can choose to focus on one of 4 more narrow or more specific endorsements or points of interest. Those 4 endorsements are, as on screen, environment and climate change law, health law, international law, and new technologies and cyber security. So sort of a law and new technologies space. You don't need to make the decision whether you want your LLM to be a general one or whether you want it to be a specific one until later in your program. So nobody needs to stress about that now. But essentially, you have opportunities within the LLM either to choose from a very wide range of papers Or if you'd like to graduate with an LLM in one of these specific fields, you will have to choose from a slightly more narrow set of papers that are obviously related to the endorsement that we're talking about. So if you want to graduate with an LLM in environment and climate change law, for instance, then of course there needs to be some environmental law in there, there needs to be some climate change law. So students will join us either in the February or in the July intake, and they will have the opportunity during that academic year essentially to study 4 subjects or 4 papers. Assessment is always around assignments as well as presentations. So there's no exams. You have moved away, if an LLB, for instance, is your background, at this point you've moved away from that exam context, and this is much more about encouraging students at postgraduate level to go deeply into researching specific areas of law. So just a few examples or illustrations of the sorts of papers, the sorts of subjects that students are able to choose and choose from during their LLM studies. You'll see there quite an array of both internationally related subjects and domestically related subjects. And it's important to make that point because when you're choosing what papers to study with us, and we refer to subjects as papers, it's important to kind of have an idea of where you think you're heading to. So if you want to make yourself most marketable, for instance, to companies that are working internationally or international organizations, that sort of thing, then you may well want to tailor your LLM to the more international space. So international trade law, for instance, or international human rights law. If your focus is that you want to be working in future in something that's more domestically related, for instance, being able to work in terms of legal advice in a domestic context, then things like advanced family law, advanced employment law are much more immediately appropriate and applicable. Sorry, there we go. So that's the LLM, and as I say, that's a 12-month program. It's our most popular program for international students, and if you have an LLB, then I would strongly recommend you considering this and having a look at this in more detail. When we come to questions, I can certainly go into some more detail as well around this, and I know obviously colleagues on this webinar will be able to talk about the post-study work rights element of this qualification and other associated immigration issues as well. Now, as I promised, for any of you who are watching who don't have an LLB or are not currently studying an LLB, there is also opportunity for you to think about studying law and studying law at Waikato. That opportunity comes in the form of a different master's degree. That's a Master of Legal Studies. So not the Master of Laws, the LLM, but the Master of Legal Studies, the MLS. This master's degree has been specifically designed with you in mind. If you have any other background than the LLB, that can be really any subject, any discipline, any bachelor's degree, then you have the opportunity to study with us a law-specific postgraduate qualification in the form of the Master of Legal Studies. Now, there are 2 configurations of the Master of Legal Studies, depending on how long your bachelor's degree was. If you took a 3-year bachelor's degree, then you can do your Master of Legal Studies with us in 18 months, 1.5 years. If your bachelor's degree is more than 3 years, 4 years or beyond, then you can take your Master of Legal Studies with us in just 1 year, just the same as the LLM. But going on the assumption that for most people in this situation, it would be a 3-year bachelor's, we typically will talk about the Master of Legal Studies as being a 1.5 year or 18 months long program. Details up on the slide there. Now, why would a student who doesn't have a law background choose to study law at postgraduate level? Well, to answer that, we have to go back to all of those comments that I've been talking about a few minutes ago. all of the different career-related opportunities that open up to you when you have got some legal study and a legal qualification under your belt. All of those opportunities around ministry and department jobs, government jobs, local government, policy, in-house legal, and the rest are open to students with a Master of Legal Studies in the same way as they are open to students with a Master of Laws. The important thing to make clear here is that neither the Master of Legal Studies nor the Master of Laws is a qualifying law degree to become a solicitor or barrister, okay? So you can't study either of these programs and then go off to be a solicitor or barrister. There's a different route for that, and I'll talk about that towards the end. But for those who want to work in a law-related field, in a field that involves law on a daily basis, but that doesn't require a practicing certificate, that doesn't require you to be a qualified solicitor or barrister, then the Master of Legal Studies is just as much open for non-law undergrads or non-law graduates as the LLM is open for law graduates. And essentially, the way in which the Master of Legal Studies has been put together mirrors the opportunities within the Master of Laws, the LLM, as well. So, for instance, here, just a quick snapshot in terms of what the degree looks like. This is making the assumption that a student has a 3-year bachelor's degree, and therefore that they need to study with us for 1.5 years. The very first thing to do is the lighter grey blocks here. And this is 2 small compulsory papers which give you the experience and the skills that you need to be able to navigate law at postgraduate level. You don't have an LLB, so you don't have that experience already. So we need to give you that quite quickly. So those first 2 light grey blocks are compulsory. You just need to get those done. Once you move beyond that into the darker grey blocks, then you have the opportunity, just like in the LLM, to be able to select the papers, select the subjects that are most interesting to you. So you can mix and match more international, more domestic. You can focus on more specifically environment related or health related or anything else. You have those 4 papers as options and things to choose from once you've got your compulsory papers out of the way. So that's what the 180-point or 18-month long Master of Legal Studies looks like. And remember, that is an opportunity that is there for people with any other bachelor's degree than an LLB. And that is actually really exciting when you think about it, because let's imagine a student who has a BA in politics, a BA in economics, a BA in business studies, or something else. If you then add to that a Master of Legal Studies, your employment opportunities are suddenly opening up wider, because you are offering and bringing to the table law-related skills, which, as I've explained, relate in a whole different array of careers, but you're also able to lean on your bachelor's background. And so you're really adding value in terms of your politics background or your economics or anything else. The 2 things together can be a really winning combination. And we are seeing our students move in, as I say, to those allied law-related professions. Okay, I don't know how I'm doing for time. Someone might have to wave madly at me to tell me to be quiet at some point, but I will now move on to the graduate diploma in law. So this is the 3rd qualification that I want to talk about. And actually, it's really the last qualification that I want to talk about in any detail. If anybody has any questions on the graduate diploma in dispute resolution, then I think we can pick that up in Q&A at the end. The graduate diploma in law is a bit different to what we've been talking about so far. Remember, the LLM and the MLS, the Master of Legal Studies, are both master's degrees, and neither of them are a route to legal practice. So neither of them will get you a qualifying certificate as a solicitor or barrister. This is where the graduate diploma comes in for any student who is interested in becoming a practicing solicitor or barrister. You would need to have an LLB degree already from any jurisdiction. That might be from India, that might be from Bangladesh, that might be from anywhere else. But if you've got your LLB degree already, there's an opportunity to use our graduate diploma in law as a pathway to take you towards becoming a practicing solicitor and barrister in New Zealand. Now, typically, the graduate diploma is a 12-month-long course, and we fill it full of the things that you need in order to move your LLB from a different jurisdiction up to the level required for legal practice in New Zealand. In order to know what is required, each student who applies for the graduate diploma in law needs to have their LLB degree assessed by our governing body, by the Council of Legal Education. So for anybody who's in this situation, anybody listening this evening with an LLB already or moving towards an LLB already, if you're thinking about legal practice, becoming a practicing solicitor and barrister in New Zealand, then the graduate diploma may well be something that's on your radar, okay? You get your LLB assessed by the Council of Legal Education. They tell you what subjects you need to study. You can put those subjects into our graduate diploma because we essentially think of our graduate diploma as an empty box that you can put in the subjects that you need. Once you've then completed that graduate diploma with us, you are one step closer to a practicing solicitor and barrister. Essentially, you are at that point at the same level as a student who studied their LLB in New Zealand. So you've reached the same level. And then everybody, whether that's the domestic student, the international student, everybody then needs to complete a further short course. I think I have a graphic on here, which is the Professional Legal Studies course, or the PROFs that we refer to in New Zealand. So if you have an LLB from a different jurisdiction, not from New Zealand, if you're serious about becoming a practicing solicitor or barrister and barrister in New Zealand, then you would use the graduate diploma to lift your LLB to the New Zealand standard required. Then everybody would do the short course, the PROFs. And once you've done that and you've got a few other little ticks like a good character reference, for instance, then you can apply for your practicing certificate and you are admitted as a barrister and solicitor of the High Court in New Zealand. So graduate diploma then is an opportunity for those people who are absolutely laser focused on being a practicing solicitor and barrister. But the main thing I want to get across today is that there are a whole host of opportunities in that law-related field which don't require practice. It don't require a practicing certificate, don't require a graduate diploma. And the way in which you access those opportunities is through a Master of Laws, an LLM, if you have a law background and an LLB, or through a Master of Legal Studies, if your background is something other than law. One last thing to say about practice and those students who choose to follow that route towards becoming a practicing solicitor and barrister. There is an added little bonus there, which is that New Zealand and Australia have a reciprocal relationship, a reciprocal agreement in place for lawyers. And so if you qualify as a practicing solicitor and barrister in New Zealand, you are automatically then able to practice in Australia, and obviously vice versa as well. So for some of our students, we do see that both domestic and international, they're interested in this route, not just because of the opportunities in New Zealand, but also looking at the opportunities in Australia as well. That's about all I wanted to cover in terms of specific programs. The LLM, the Master of Legal Studies, and the Graduate Diploma in Law. As I say, the Graduate Diploma in Dispute Resolution is a little bit niche, and I'll quite happily talk about that in questions, but I don't want to clutter that up now. I think Ashish is going to jump in and say something a little bit more in terms of scholarships and maybe a few more general comments about the university. And I will stick around to be involved in Q&A if you've got any questions. If you're too shy to ask questions at this point or in this forum, I'll just leave my email address there on the screen at the bottom there, nathan.cooper@waikato.ac.nz. And I genuinely would be delighted to hear from you by email. You're very, very welcome to ask your questions that way if that's easier for you. Or once we've finished today, if something pops into your head after the call has finished, then please do feel free to get in touch with me via email. So, Ashish, if that's okay with you, I'll hand over to you and you can say a few words on scholarships and the like.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Professor Nathan, and thank you, students, for listening to him, I would say, patiently for last 35 to 40 minutes. In terms of scholarships, I think these are one of the most exciting things to happen with the university, and we are having an international excellence awards for all international students who are securing an offer letter in hand. So if you have a conditional offer letter or a formal offer letter of place, we encourage students to apply for the Vice Chancellor International Excellence Scholarship. The best part about these scholarships are these are merit-based scholarships. They open every month. So at the start of the first day of the month, and they close on the last day of the month. And the following month, the scholarship team looks at these applications. Now, when we use the word merit based, it means that if you've really done well in academics in your home country, whether it's a law degree, if you're applying for a law qualification, then your chances of getting these scholarships are very high. So some students across the world have got scholarships in the range of up to 5,000 New Zealand dollars. If you're really high on your academic bracket, you can easily get between 5 to 10,000 New Zealand dollars. And if you're consistently being an excellent academic graduate, there are good number of students internationally who have even secured 15,000 New Zealand dollars of scholarship as well. So our piece of advice to all students is that don't wait for the formal offer, or don't wait for you to decide on whether you are looking at Waikato as an acceptance. Even if you have an offer in hand, please do apply for scholarships, because that will enable you to take your decision whether you really want to be at Waikato for your courses. Apart from law, I think Nathan has covered it well, but the Faculty of Law also comes over one of our most emerging and popular division at university, which is Faculty of Arts, Law, Psychology, and Social Sciences. So we have great qualifications for students to look at in the area of psychology, one of the only 3 New Zealand universities which have a pathway to clinical psychology. We have social sciences, and we do have a lot of qualifications in arts. And not to surprise you all, we also have an undergrad and a master's degree in music as well. Yeah. We can just go on, but I'll just stop it here with the Faculty of Arts, Law, and Psychology and Social Sciences. And we are happy to take any set of questions for these students now.
Thank you, Ashish. And thank you, Professor Nathan. So with this, what I would like to do is I would like to quickly move to a Q&A round.
Sure.
So I will take the first question, which is, how does the Master of Laws program prepare graduates for legal careers in New Zealand? Professor Nathan, would you like to answer that? Yeah.
Great question. Thank you for that, Farhana. First of all, a clarification then, in case it wasn't absolutely clear already. The Master of Laws program will not get you a practicing certificate to become a solicitor and barrister in New Zealand. If you want that, then there is a different route, and we've mentioned that in relation to the graduate diploma and the professionals. What the Master of Laws does do is it prepares you for law-related or law-associated careers. The sorts of things, the sorts of jobs where you are dealing with law on a daily basis, but you are not representing clients as a solicitor, where you are not speaking in court as a barrister. For a lot of people, it's the solicitor and barrister that is the be all and end all of a law related career. Okay, that's what you have in your mind. That's what we see on the TV. But when you stop and think about it, what is law? Law relates to a whole host of daily activities. It regulates our behavior. It tells us what we can and can't do in a whole host of different contexts. And so law and being able to work with the law in different employment contexts is so important. In a commercial context, we need we need to know how to navigate our tax obligations. We need to know how to navigate our safety and our commercial responsibilities. In a public sector context, we have to know about public law and constitutional law and our human rights obligations and all sorts of other different things. And then very niche possibilities as well around things like administration of justice and the police and probation service, etc. So if you're thinking about legal careers, careers that involve law and an understanding of law, the Master of Laws absolutely prepares you for that, because it gives you a year to be able to drill down in real depth into key areas of law, and then to take that learning and that experience out into the world of work. I hope that helps a little bit.
It definitely did, because you definitely gave the perspective and the difference between two. Thank you, Professor. So the next question is there a thesis or dissertation requirement for the Master of Laws program?
There's not a requirement, but one of the options that students can take if they choose is, rather than studying one taught paper, structured paper, they can elect to do a dissertation instead, or a small thesis instead. Some students do, some students don't. There are pros and cons to both. Obviously, being involved in a taught paper gives you that structure and helps you to order your time. The dissertation gives you a bit more freedom to go into even more depth. The dissertation, for instance, is often a good opportunity if a student is thinking about perhaps a PhD. So not necessarily looking at a law-related job at the end of their master's degree, but actually looking at moving into academia and getting a PhD. And again, obviously, that's another career route that is available.
Thank you. The next one is, are there opportunities for international students to work part-time or gain practical legal experience during their studies? That's a good question. Yep.
It's a great question. Absolutely. So I suppose we could answer that on a couple of different angles, and some of the other colleagues on the call will be better equipped to answer it in terms of what you're allowed to do work-wise during your study. But in terms of the opportunities to essentially kind of do work experience, I think that might be where this question is coming from. Absolutely, there is. Some of our international students, even this year, are busy doing work experience with the Citizens Advice Bureau, for instance. So doing legal advice work with what is essentially a charity. We've had students who have done mini placements with local firms. We've had students who've done work with the regional council in their legal team. Like a lot of things, these opportunities rarely are offered to a student without them doing any work for it. You have to go out and get it. You have to be determined and ask those questions, write those letters, send those emails out, and look for the opportunities. But if you are a motivated student, then absolutely those opportunities are available to you. And as staff and as teachers, we're also available to help you with networking, with help you with opportunities that come up, help you with your references and CVs and all of that sort of thing as well. That's the sort of stuff that I'm quite regularly involved in with my students. I think only yesterday we had a careers fair on the Hamilton campus, which was absolutely packed full of local employers, and that did include some law firms and some law related opportunities as well. And our students were mingling, talking to those employers, thinking and connecting about those opportunities all of yesterday. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Nathan. If I can add on the immigration perspective to this question, international students studying here in New Zealand would have an option to work part-time. They would have work rights 20 hours a week during their study term. They can also work full-time during their scheduled holidays and summer vacation. So definitely there are opportunities to work, and your student visa would also give you that option to work. Yeah. Over to you, Priyanka.
Thank you. Thank you. So while Professor Nathan was talking about the career fair that you had yesterday, there is a similar question here, which I see. Could you elaborate on the specific requirements and procedures for registering as a legal practitioner in New Zealand? Would you be able to give a
Yeah, absolutely. So I touched on that when we talked about the graduate diploma, but I can very quickly recap as well, and that's certainly something that we could pick up again by email if that's helpful, because I appreciate that it's not necessarily the most straightforward route. It can take, listening to several times over. So first of all, you would need to have an LLB. If you have an LLB from a New Zealand law school, then that's one thing, but I'm assuming that would not be the case. So you've got an LLB from a jurisdiction outside of New Zealand. First step is that you have to get that qualification assessed by the Council of Legal Education. Typically, they will want to see that you have done study in all of the core areas of law that form part of the LLB in New Zealand. And more than that, they often want students to study those core or some of those core papers in a New Zealand law school. So what usually happens when an international student gets their LLB assessed is that the Council of Legal Education comes back and tells them that they need to study 4 or 5 papers. Typically, that would be the areas of law that are most different in New Zealand compared to wherever the other jurisdiction is. Criminal law, contract, torts, public law, constitutional law, land, those sorts of things, okay? What a student can do then is that they can put those subjects or those papers into a graduate diploma with us, and they can study that usually during the course of a year, but obviously I can't guarantee that it would be 1 year exactly, because it depends how many papers the Council of Legal Education requires a particular student to study. Once you've completed those papers, you've ticked the boxes that the CLE, the Council of Legal Education, requires, then your LLB from another jurisdiction plus your graduate diploma is deemed to be equal with a LLB from a New Zealand law school. And then everybody, you and the domestic students, all then need to do a 5-month course, the PROFs, the Professional Legal Studies course, which is not actually provided by any of the universities. It's one of 2 private providers in the country. You choose one of those, you can study that onshore, you can study it online, you can study it intensively over a number of weekends. There are a whole different set of ways in which you can study that course. Once you've completed that course, then you can apply for a practicing certificate to be a solicitor and barrister in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, there's no distinction made between solicitors and barristers. You are both. And I know that's different to some jurisdictions. Hopefully that's clear, but as I say, we can pick that up again in due course if necessary. It's not the easiest route, but it is a route that our students take. It is a route that our students are able to navigate if they are determined to do that.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Professor
Professor.
Nathan. And if I can add on to that that answer, and I also see a very similar question asked, and I'll try to give a immigration perspective to that. We see a lot of people wanting to do a course which leads to registration with the intent of then applying for their residence, because barristers is one of the registered occupations and they can claim points for their role. So I wanted to here clarify that if you plan to do a program, let's say one of their masters, you will have more than one pathway going towards the residence. One could be, and one of the attendees is asking this question, that I've completed 1 year master course in New Zealand and 1 year work experience. Can I get my residence? So multiple ways in which you can have a pathway to residence. First, barrister is one of the registered occupations there. So let's say if you get if you get registered as a sole barrister, and the requirement for that is definitely registration with the New Zealand Law Society, and then admission to a role of a barrister and solicitor of the High Court of New Zealand, and then a practicing certificate as a barrister with the New Zealand Law Society. So that will give you 6 points straight away. And if you have a job offer with an accredited employer, you can then go ahead and apply for your residence straight away. However, if you do not get that, or if you're doing a program which doesn't lead to a registration straight away, there are still options for moving on to a residence visa. For example, if you do a master's program, that will give you 5 points, and that will also give you 3 years post-study work visa. So when you have 3 years with an open work visa and you get into one of these skilled employments, you need to work in one of your skilled employment for 1 year before being eligible to then apply for the residence visa. So there are multiple ways wherein doing these programs could lead you to a residence visa. Yeah, just wanted to add that in.
And Vandana, if I could just add to that, just an illustration of that. 100% agree with what you're saying. What we're seeing is our students are actually doing that as well. So another student a couple of years ago finished their LLM with us. They moved from that into a period of post-study work where they were able to look for work. That took this particular student a little while to find something that was related, but she found a job with the Law Commission in Wellington, so looking on at questions of legal reform. She got that job. She was in that job for over a year. She's now a resident as a result of that. So the LLM together with the related employment, and she's got residence. So and similar to the example of the woman who's now a senior manager in probations, similar sort of situation, came out, used the post-study work opportunity to look for where those doors are opening, get a good job that's related, and she's got residence.
Thank you so much for clarifying. I'm sure that will give a lot of clarification to the attendees, because sometimes, especially the occupations which do lead to registration, they only think that they will only get a job if they have the registration. So that's not true. There are so many other opportunities if you have that legal background to then go and find a job and work in.
That's right.
Priyanka, I feel that you may have to take the questions a bit selectively, and we may not be able to answer all the questions, but attendees, we'll make sure that we provide you the answers after this webinar if you're not able to take your question during this live session today.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So unfortunately, we have exceeded our time limit. So I will try to wrap it up. I will take last two questions and before we wrap up. So the question that I would like to pick up would be, at what stage, Professor, do we have the option to choose the specialization for LLM? Is there an option to change the specialization at a later date?
Okay, yeah, so yes, there is, but obviously you cannot graduate with a particular endorsement unless you've done at least 2 papers that are related to the endorsement that you want. Okay, so the latest stage really would be kind of about halfway through, where you have to work out, what have I done? What are my options available to me for what I still need to do? And do I want to make sure that I align those options with a particular endorsement? Or am I happy to just graduate with a general LLM? Personally, and it is only my personal opinion, the LLM as a qualification is so well known globally that a general LLM is a great thing to have. It looks good on the CV. It immediately indicates that you've got a law background with the LLB and that you've chosen to build on that in the LLM. So for me, I don't think the endorsements are necessarily that important, but for somebody who wants to use the LLM to show that they have specialized in a particular area, it may be that that's useful to them, that they can graduate with an LLM in health law or an LLM in international law. But yeah, you can basically decide up until about the halfway mark in relation to the papers that you're choosing.
Thank you, Professor. So one last question, ma'am, this would be more to with the immigration advice. If I completed my 1-year master's course in New Zealand and 1 year of work experience out of my study field, still I get a residency?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a few things I would like to clarify here. So if let's say if somebody completed a master's here in New Zealand, we do have a skilled migrant residence pathway, and you have to get 6 points in that pathway to be then eligible to apply for the residence visa. So your master's at level 9 will give you 5 points towards it. And then you need to gather one more point to be then be eligible to apply. So 1 year of work experience can give you 1 point. However, not any work experience. So there are a few things that you have to be aware of. So your 1 year work experience that is needed should be with an accredited employer. That's the first requirement. Then your work experience should be a skilled work experience. So there are a few parameters, there's a few details in the instruction. What is a skilled work experience? Any work experience which is for an occupation, which is an ANSCO 1, 2, and 3, and you get paid a median wage rate. Or if your role is in ANSCO 4 or 5, then you need to be paid 1.5 times the median wage rate. So this can get a bit of tricky for applicants to understand, and we are more than happy to assess your case and then provide you more clarification in there. But that's another requirement in there. Third requirement, your work has to be full-time. In immigration context, full-time is at least 30 hours a week. And then you need to have a permanent contract, or if it's a fixed term contract, the fixed term should be 12 months at least. So that these are few parameters on for you to then assess whether your work experience in New Zealand is a skilled work experience as per immigration settings or not. So if yes, definitely you can claim the remaining 1 point, and 1 year of work experience after your master's will make you eligible to then apply for your residence visa.
Thank you. And I would just like to take one last question, Professor, just one last question. So that would be, what's the difference between the LLM and the graduate diploma in dispute resolution with respect to the career opportunities? Would you be able to give an insight around, the difference between the two?
Yes, certainly. So the graduate diploma in dispute resolution has been developed in conjunction between the law faculty and our management school, and also our School of Education. So it pulls from an array of disciplines. So it's not anywhere near as law focused as the Master of Legal Studies or the Master of Laws, which are entirely law focused. Instead, it's a qualification that's there to provide employees, essentially, or employers, with the skills around resolving dispute. Okay, so it's much more about those soft interpersonal skills than it is about substantive law. So there's some law in there, of course, but there's also some management studies in there, there's some educational psychology in there, there's all sorts of different things. So it's really quite a different beast. The reason I didn't want to go into it today is that in any detail in terms of presenting it, as well as the time, and I'm aware that I probably spoke for too long, is that the graduate diploma really it doesn't come with the post-study work rights, and so it kind of is a little bit different to what we've spoken about in those postgraduate opportunities. But in terms of academically, the main distinction is that the graduate diploma in dispute resolution is an amalgamation, a mixture of different perspectives and different disciplines. The Master of Laws, the Master of Legal Studies are wholly law-related study, going deep into the study of law.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. So with this, I would just like to say that there are a lot of other questions over there, but since we are running out of time, we already have. So what I would like to do is we will get back to you. And also for all of those who have not been able to ask the questions, you can definitely write to us on an email address, which is contact@nzimmigration.info. I repeat, that's contact@nzimmigration.info. And with this, I would now like to conclude our webinar. But before that, I would just like to thank Professor Nathan. The slides were incredibly helpful and interesting, providing us with valuable insights into various profiles. And I really want to mention this. I really appreciated the slide where you mentioned or you highlighted the importance of seeing colleagues not as competitors, but as allies. It really resonated with me and I found it very valuable. So thank you for sharing. And along with that, I would also like to thank Ashish for giving insights about scholarships and your support always for making a difference in the academic journey for all the students out there. So thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Rai. Can't thank you enough. Always has been a helping hand for everyone. So thank you. So with this, I would now like to say thank you to everyone and conclude this particular webinar.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Thank
Goodbye.
you, everyone. Thank you.